NC State will walk into Death Valley against all odds on Saturday afternoon. How might they pull off the upset? We got the keys.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Friday sponsor is FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Head on over to FanDuel.com in order to get started. Happy Friday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Kenton, NC State has a very difficult task ahead of them tomorrow. Saturday afternoon, it is a noon game on ABC. NC State at Clemson to open up the ACC schedule for the Wolfpack. How might they possibly pull off the upset? Well, let's dive into Kenton's keys.
All righty. So offensively, we have talked ad nauseum about the offensive line struggles. We have talked about how the running game can't get going and the quarterback has to stay upright, and that's been a struggle, and this is going to be a really good defensive line. Biggest key, to me, this is one of the biggest. Give up less than 8 QB pressures or sacks. Now, I know some people will be saying that's so much, that's preposterous, that's insane. I say that to say, if you can hold this team to where you need to be at, if you can hold this team to around this level of, hey, 2-3 times per quarter you're getting home, but it's not a regular occurrence like once per drive or every time CJ's dropping back, he's feeling a little uncomfortable, you'll be just fine. This means that CJ is making his reads, getting the ball out of his hand quickly, and guys are getting open. So this is definitely a key to beating Clemson. Again, if you have a great defensive line, eliminate the great defensive line by making the reads, being on time, being on target, and, of course, by blocking. That's the best way to do it. So less than 8 QB pressures and sacks.
For reference, last year when we had to start MJ Morris against Clemson, MJ Morris was only sacked 3 times in that game. Although we had our offensive struggles, the offensive line did a good enough job keeping MJ on his feet so he was able to distribute the ball to, well, mainly KC Concepcion. So the very same concept is going to be imperative for NC State tomorrow. Our second key. Rack
up the yak. Here's the deal, right? I need to see 80-plus yards and yards after catch. And here's why I say that. The reality is you're not going to beat Clemson by, hitting a bunch of deep bombs on these DBs. I don't think that that's your way to go. I really and truly don't. However, force guys to make a lot of open field tackles. Now you're looking at a little bit different of a story. Is that not the routine that played out last year, Grayson?
It sure is.
Not the exact role that was given last year. It was, listen, we will get the ball underneath, and if they can make tackles, if they can be effective in tackling to the point where it's, hey, as soon as the first guy gets the ball, we're down, they'll win this ball game. Fortunately for NC State, we came out winners because that yak was present. Well, guess what? Like Uncle Shannon Sharp says, we need the mouths and the yak.
One of the 2 touchdowns that KC Concepcion scored on Clemson last year, it was literally just a simple slant route, broke 1 tackle, and he's off to the races. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what we need to be gunning for tomorrow, but kind of in a similar sense, like Kenton was talking about, I don't expect NC State to bomb it over the top and run deep posts and deep crosses and fly routes and expect a great amount of success when you have a freshman quarterback in Death Valley. It's just not that feasible. However, you do need to spread the field and let your skill players do what they do best, move into open space and get busy. This new revamped wide receiver room is something that we haven't had much of at NC State in years past. The pure athleticism is something that we need to put on full display against a very talented Clemson secondary. Utilize your playmakers, get them into open space, and then let them do most of the work for you. And our third offensive key,
score 24 or more points. At the end of the day, this is what offense is all about, scoring points. And if they can score over 24, I think you've got a great shot. While I think Clemson does well enough on offense, and while I think that they are better than they showed at Georgia, I think if you can score 24 really, if you can get to 31, I think that's the real number. If you get to 31, I'm almost guaranteeing a win here because, again, I think that our defense against Clemson, if you're scoring 31 points, that means you're on the field. That means you're having long, sustained drives, and your defense isn't out there back to back to back to back to where they just wear down, and at the end of the game, it gets out of hand. So score 24-plus points is what I'm looking at as a key to the offense in terms of how many they need to score to where I feel like I'll feel good about this game.
24 is the exact number it took to beat Clemson last year in 2023. And if NC State does have a shot in this game, I think they're going to have to muck it up, so to speak. And the sentiment that Dave Doran likes to win ugly, he's going to have to try and win this game ugly because I don't think you can get into a track meet with Clemson. We don't have all the confidence in the world that a new quarterback is going to be able to operate at that high of a level to play keep up with Clemson in a game like this one. So I would expect if NC State's going to win, it's going to have to be a low-scoring effort, but it's going to take at least 24 to get there. And now, Kenton, let's jump over to defense and special teams.
Yeah, so in terms of defense, I think that Phil Maffa sets the table for this offense. Once you have to bring more guys into the box, you know, you're playing into the hands of this offense and what Mel Kiper wants to see with no too high or more looks, because again, you're having to have a situation where you have to stop the run. However, if you can stop Phil Maffa effectively with who you already have in the box, hold him under 70 yards, make him a non-factor more or less, you are in a very good position. It does not guarantee you a win, but it puts you in a damn good position when you're saying, you know what? Either it's going to be Cade Klubnik or it's going to be somebody else on that offense that has to show up and win this game because we're not going to let that load of a running back do the job. Second, Cade Klubnik finishes with a sub-60 QBR. Here's the thing, right? We all know QBR is the measure 1 to 100, how well a quarterback plays and all that good stuff. Every play that they have an effect on is what really gets counted in here. 50 is average. To me, if you can keep Cade Klubnik near average or worse, you're in a good spot to win this football game. If you combine these first two keys, I struggle to find a world where you lose this game besides well, actually, let me not say I struggle to find a world. Let me not say that. I will say the world in which you lose this game where those first two get accomplished, CJ Bailey and that offense look completely out of sorts. They couldn't do anything but piss down their leg if you combine these first two and you don't walk away with a win.
I keep going back to this matchup last year in 2023, but I think NC State will have to play a very similar type of game to get a very similar effect. Cade Klubnik last year against NC State had a 52.4 QBR. Kind of proves Kenton's point here. In game one against Georgia this year, he was 42.5. Against App State in week 2, 99.6. Nearly a perfect performance. So you see where that scale kind of hits. Last year, 52.4. He played a very mediocre average game. You're going to have to force him to do that again for NC State to come out on top.
If he shows up and has a great game, your doors are probably going to get blown off there. Last, allow 4 or less explosive plays. Here's my deal about how you need to play Clemson. Like Grayson said, muck it up. Make it nasty. Make it physical. Make it just hey, we're down in the mud and you got to beat us every play of the game. When I think about what that looks like, think a lot about the Duke game last year, just minus those few 80-yarders or 60-yarders where it's like, man, those are the back-breaking plays, and without those, you probably win that game because they were unable to sustain a full drive. I go back to this game, and I say, make it really, really – hey, Wesco Jr. is a stud. He's a stud. If you don't let him get behind you, find out how much of a stud he is when you're keeping everything in front of you. Hey, Phil Maffa is a stud. When you're doing more than thudding, when you're getting there with not just the intentions of making a big hit, but making a solid tackle, how good can Clemson be having to do it over and over and over again? Despite the fact that some people after the App State game say Cade Klubnik is an entirely new decision maker, hey, that's fine. I'm fine with your belief in that. However, I think that it's better to make him make more decisions than less. I think as a team, you want him having to make more correct decisions than you want him to make more correct decisions as opposed to less. Because when the team is making habit plays, when they're making plays where, hey, this is basic 1, 2, 3, boom, and playmakers are doing their thing, that's not what you want. But when you are forcing the signal caller to make decisions, to make the read, to make the checks, That's where you'll be all right. And you do that by making teams sustain drives. You make teams sustain drives by not allowing big plays. So allow 4 or less explosive plays.
Come right back to that point of having to muck it up. A lot of people moan and groan about Dave Dorn wanting to win ugly, and I can certainly understand on a lot of different levels why it is so annoying in games past, but this is the type of game you want to win ugly. You want NC State to win like 24-20, 24-21, something in that ballpark. You want a very slow, non-offensive, very physical, drag it out type game. If you get that, I think that is where NC State can hang around long enough to compete in this game. And to that point, you're going to have to take away Phil Maffa going for 60 yards or Wesco breaking 1 tackle and going for 70 yards. Those types of things will absolutely be backbreakers in a game like this one. So as best you can, keep everything in front of you. And when the tackle is presented, you have to finish the play. That is how you get off of the field. Coming up next, we're going to get into Fan Friday, addressing our top comments of the week. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our first Friday sponsor is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's the formula for winning championships. But it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. That's because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Middle portion of our Friday show. Now time for Fan Friday, addressing our top comments of the week. Here we go. First one comes from ACC State Fan on Twitter. He says, what do you guys think the biggest issue offensively has been these past few weeks? It's easy to say McCall, but some of the play calling wasn't the best either. Do you see some of those issues being resolved with Bailey starting at quarterback?
I really hate to say it. Anai has been cooking. He really has. I know people don't want to acknowledge it because the offensive results have not been great. But I want you to imagine, just take away the actual result of the play and look at the buildup. Look at, was this concept open? Was it available? Did it do what it was supposed to do? Right? Because it's easy to say, well, hey, you know, the play calling isn't the best because you're performing poorly or because you throw an interception. If you throw an interception on a stick route against cover 6 and your wide receiver does exactly what he's supposed to do, he created enough space from the inside linebacker. If you put it on his chest where it's supposed to be, he catches it, turns up for 5 yards. What the hell else can the coach do? If you're counting on a 6-year senior to say, wait a minute, I'm fading away, there's a defender rushing at me that I probably cannot get away from, I need to either eat this sack or throw it in the dirt. What the hell is the coach supposed to do? I'm not even going to get into the run game, but what I will say is this. If I am sitting here counting on my offensive line to give me just standard protection, I don't mean clean pocket, you've got time to, you know, drop back, make a sandwich, call your mom, tell her you love her, call your boys, make plans for after the game, and then release them. I'm not asking for all that. I'm asking for a standard, regular pocket. If I can't give a guy that, what more can the offensive coordinator really do in terms of play calling? Because we can't get the basics out of the block. So it's not just McCall. Don't get me wrong. I want to say that. I will say no group outside of the pass catchers has been good enough offensively. No group. And when your offensive line is bad, it's going to make your running backs look bad de facto. It's going to make your quarterbacks look worse de facto. But the quarterback play has also left a lot to be desired. So it's not just McCall, but to me, the play calling, you know, I talked about this during the game and being there in Charlotte. The coaches called a game that for the first 2.5 quarters or so, I'm like, what more do you want from the guys? They're putting you in position, make the play, or don't. Come retire, come grab some pine, come sit with us and have a conversation on Locked On Wolfpack because you're not meant to be on the field.
I don't know if we could be clearer about the fact that Robert Anae is not the problem. In fact, he was one of the biggest reasons that we finished 5-0 in 2023. The way he was able to scheme KC specifically into open space was a large reason the offense was able to produce enough. Kind of in the same sense of this year, outside of a couple shotgun 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 calls, I do have a couple gripes with that. But overall, Anae has been calling pretty good ball games. A lot of the plays, although they have failed, you can see where the idea was because it's been there. The wide receiver separation has been there. The execution has largely not been there. And that also extends into the run game. We've talked a lot about the offensive line. I think sometimes we're a little too harsh because I'd say like 80% of the offensive line will be fine, but then you miss one key block and the whole play gets blown up. It's been repetitive instances of that. And so when you have enough of that repeatedly, it's like, okay, well, I think the whole offense stinks. I wouldn't exactly say that is the case, but when you're missing on key execution from the offensive line, sometimes from the running backs, and a lot of times from the quarterback, the whole thing is going to be a sour product. So it hasn't been just McCall. It hasn't been just the offensive line. It hasn't been just the running backs. But when you're repeatedly missing like one or two pieces on a lot of different plays, it adds up to a big nothing burger. Where I think the intrigue lies with CJ Bailey is he does have a live arm and he has seemingly no fear to cock up and then let it rip. I think potentially you could see that change the play calling a little bit, but again, I would expect it to be fairly simplified against a defense like Clemson's. Second one comes from Bryant Moreland on Twitter. He says, thoughts on why Dave so quickly pivoted to CJ? Never has been known to make a change like this so quickly. Well, number one, it's because he had to, regardless of how injured McCall is. When you have a quarterback go down and he's not able to play the rest of that game, it's CJ or nothing. Your other option would be what? Lex Thomas? The one thing that did surprise me is how early in the week that Dave committed to CJ Bailey being QB1. And I kind of look back to last year when the MJ Morris redshirting saga started to leak out. Dave got really annoyed in the way it did come out because he wanted to maintain competitive advantage going into that Wake Forest game. When MJ's camp basically said they were thinking about redshirting and it became widely known, the carpet got pulled right from out under Dave. So I was kind of surprised to see him stand firmly on Monday and say, nope, CJ's our quarterback and he will remain our quarterback for the foreseeable future. I'm happy in the fact that Dave both made this decision really quickly and he's standing firmly behind it.
I'm going to tell you something that a lot of people may not like to hear. And some people are going to say, Kenton, you're doing it again. You're falling for the bait again. You're taking the cheese again. I think the difference between Brennan and CJ was less, or the difference between Brennan and MJ was less than the difference between McCall and CJ. I believe that I still stand by this, despite how the saga went down. I believe MJ Morris was the better player. That there's no doubt in my mind there. However, I think that gap was smaller, and so you try to lean in and stay with the senior guy and all that. I think that gap was smaller than what it is between CJ and Grayson right now. I have not heard reports about a quarterback as good as they were about CJ Bailey in quite some time. For a true freshman. I have not heard anybody talk about a true freshman quarterback in NC State's program in that way, not even with MJ Morris. I don't think people talked about him the same way they did CJ Bailey. And so, to see him now stepping into his moment and all that, not really too surprised by it.
Next one comes from Zach Hare on Twitter. He says, what happens if Dave turns CJ into Jack Chambers versus Syracuse in 2022? That is the ultimate playing not to lose type scenario. And thinking about that Syracuse game back in 2022, my blood pressure instantly spiked. That was one of the more frustrating NC State games I've watched in some time. It seemed like the entire playbook was based on Jack Chambers not throwing the football. And if you're going to ask your quarterback to not throw the football, you got major problems. They're not going to do that tomorrow against Clemson because if CJ Bailey's not throwing the football, I might just not even watch. I will be in the press box like this for 4 quarters because that would be embarrassing football. You cannot take away what CJ brings to the table most, and that is athleticism and his arm talent. If you dumb down the playbook so much that you're taking away from what CJ does best, you're in for a world of hurt. I don't want to see NC State play not to lose. I want to see NC State play to win because playing not to lose, more often than not, it ends up like you are playing to lose. You have to come out fast. You have to come out fearless, and you got to let it all hang if you want a chance to beat Clemson on the road.
Wolfpack fans, the only thing that CJ and Jack Chambers have in common is they're both black. That is it. That is all. That is it. With all due respect to Jack Chambers, he won us some ball games. He finished out some wins. Hey, more power to the young man. Those are two entirely different players, okay? Jack Chambers, even if you took away his passing ability, which, again, we now have enough evidence to definitively say 1 year rentals, you are very much so handicapping what they can do as a passer because they don't have the time to build the continuity with their pass catchers. But even if we took that away, Jack Chambers is a dynamic athlete. He just is. He was amazing on the ground. CJ is a much better passer and thrower. And there is a difference because thrower, that's how deep can you get it? How fast can you get it there? Does it jump off your hand? Passer, do you do so accurately? Do you do so with touch? Do you do all? He's better at both of those things than Jack Chambers, okay? And trust me, I know that I'm joking when I say the only thing they have in common is they're black, but very seriously, this is not a moment where you should look at these two and say it could be similar because even if, and by the way, Zach, I'm not saying you're saying that. I understand the question is, what if Dave turns him into that, meaning the play calling? Because if you decide to say, you know what, CJ, I don't want you taking any shots. I don't want you throwing it in some windows or whatever the case may be. You've resigned yourself to losing a game very, very handily because we don't have the support around him to do that. We had the support around Jack Chambers to where we could have won that game. There's a world where we win that game without him throwing the ball much. There's not a world where we win this game with CJ Bailey being primarily a runner.
Next one comes from Stater on Twitter. He says, these are Anai questions, but can we have at least a decent run game on Saturday? How can we do that? Does the offensive line just not have the tenacity? Trying to nickel and dime Clemson with easy rhythm passes for CJ most likely will not last. We need explosives. What say you?
Well, I say that the key to beating this team is a lot like it was last year. Make those nickel and dimes into explosives.
Right.
That's what you got to do. And here's the thing. I actually do believe that CJ Bailey has the ability with our receivers to hit an explosive or two. You cannot come out of the gates with that as the expectation.
Yes.
I think you have to nickel and dime them into lull them to sleep. Lull them on into that. Hey, come on. We're gentle. This is nice and slow. See, we're just throwing a couple little bubble screens. A little drag's not going to hurt anybody. Boom, over the top. That's what needs to happen here more so than, hey, buddy, we're going 4 verts out the gate. We're going deep benders and verticals, and you got to handle it. That's not a recipe to win. So I do think that the explosives should come. It would be nice if the explosives come, but yards after catch have to be where we kind of at least start this thing off to build that foundation and then build upon that with some explosives. Or say damn the torpedoes and start the game off with a deep shot. Say, hey, we're going to get a little crazy. We're going to get a little wild here and try one deep. So, either way it goes, I do understand that the explosives, you're going to need a couple to keep them honest for sure. But with that being said, I want to see the underneath stuff set up the explosives.
How should they look to get the run game going?
My honest answer is you don't. The offensive line has been too inconsistent. We talked about this before. There's been too much Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You don't know which one you're going to get. You don't know which nature of this offensive line you're going to get. And I'd say maybe give it through half the first quarter. If through about half the first quarter, you're looking at negative rushing yards or 2 yards a carry, something like that, go ahead and accept, hey, today may not be the day until we get these guys worn down or beat down, and then we'll go from there. But honestly, a lot like I said in the Tennessee game, stop running the ball. That it's not getting you anywhere. Sure, you could say they'll pin their ears back or whatever the case may be, but if you're making your quick game sharp and precise, hey, more power to them if they can stop that at a high clip based upon their ability to jump everything underneath without any concern of getting hit over the top of something coming back.
Yeah, I think you have to pass to set up the run. I think NC State has been so predictable. Clemson's front seven, if they know you're going to run, they're going to stack the box and make you pay for it. I think this might be a game where you rely a little bit heavier on Smothers and Raphael to kind of bounce some of these runs to the outside. You saw some of that success in that Tennessee game before it all went south. Smothers' speed, I think, can be really key in a game like this one because Waters has just been too inconsistent and not breaking enough tackles to warrant some success projecting into this Clemson game. So you have to stay unpredictable as best you can if you want a chance at establishing the run. And last one here comes from our guy Drew on Twitter. Doubt is at an all-time high, and by God, that's Dave's music. The Pack thrives under doubt, so is State going to do this thing on Saturday?
You know,
deep exhale.
The Pack thrives on doubt, and I'll tell you, this is the most I've ever doubted this team. This is the most that I've ever felt like coming into a game where I'm like, nah, this ain't it. This ain't it. So please prove me wrong, Dave. I would love if that is your song, then hey, sweet chin music and you won't pass the ox. Go ahead and go off with it, Dave. Go ahead and do your best jig to this song here because I have little to no belief nor expectations for NC State heading into Death Valley.
Drew, I'm not going to lie to you, man. This doesn't feel great. But Law of the Wolf, reverse psychology, whatever kind of dark magic we can conjure up, we will more than happily be proven wrong by an NC State team that is hungry enough to go get the job done in Death Valley. Kind of the same pregame speech we gave for the Tennessee game. No one thinks that NC State can go get the job done. No one thinks that a true freshman in CJ Bailey is going to beat Clemson on the road in his first ever start. Perhaps that's where the magic happens, but it's going to take a lot of that magic to pull off a very tough feat. Not many teams can go to Clemson and win this type of game. It makes it much harder when you have so many struggles coming into a game like this. So the odds are certainly stacked against us. Doubt certainly is at an all-time high. But again, we are welcoming with open arms. Dave Dorn and the NC State Wolfpack, please prove us wrong. Feel free to use this as bulletin board material for the rest of the season, but I don't think NC State is prepared enough for a game like this one. And rounding out our Friday show, we're going to give our final thoughts and predictions ahead of Saturday's ACC opener. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our second Friday sponsor is FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, but that's because it's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and if you choose, you can cancel at any time. Head on over to FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Last couple of minutes here on Friday, just kind of recapping all of our pregame thoughts for NC State at Clemson. Kenton, what does NC State have to hammer home if they want a true shot at pulling off the upset?
A true shot at pulling off the upset means your offense stayed on schedule and did just enough. The defense made tackles. Those are the two biggest things to me because, honestly, I look at our secondary and I believe coverage-wise, they can match up with Clemson. I honestly and truly believe – oh, the line has moved down to 18.5. Look at that. But anywho, I really and truly believe that the reality of what we're looking at here, again, make tackles, stay on schedule offensively, you'll be fine. You have a shot. If you don't do those things, it could get really hairy really quickly.
I'm going to go ahead and say it again. NC State has to find a way to muck this thing up. And I've used this reference before. Think Virginia basketball. Just slow, methodical, very painful to watch. That's the type of ball game that NC State has to force Clemson into. And I'd have to imagine that Dave's going to want to implore a very similar tactic in terms of time of possession. You're going to want to keep Clemson's offense off of the field as long as you can and keep life easier on your defense. Again, that complementary football aspect, if the offense is going 3 and out, turnover, 3 and out, super long day at the office. But if you can put together 10 to 12 play drives, put some points on the scoreboard, possibly turn Klubnik and Clemson's offense over a couple times, then that hope will become one hell of a drug. NC State wants to find a way to just hang around and keep it to like a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. That was a very similar formula to what you saw way back in 2016 when we almost got the job done down there in Death Valley. Very similar type of ball game is going to have to take place if NC State can pull off a incredible upset. And it pains me because preseason, I wanted this game more than any other game on the schedule. But based on what we've seen so far, you have a freshman quarterback, and Clemson perhaps is maybe even revitalized. I don't have a ton of confidence that NC State can pull off what feels like in some senses as the impossible. It's not the impossible. I think they have the tools to shock Clemson, but it's going to take a perfect ball game. You see on the screen that the lines have actually come down a little bit. They reached as high as 20.5. They're back down to 18.5. But Kenton, you see that over under is at 44.5. Does that inspire maybe a little bit of hope in terms of mucking it up?
I mean, for sure. You think about 20, or you think about 44.5 being the over under here. That means that they're expecting a very low scoring game, or that only one side scores a lot and the other scores none. So, objectively speaking here, I think that the Sharks see a fairly low scoring game as well. We'll see how this thing actually plays out, though.
If you heard our score predictions on the end of Thursday's episode, I have a final score of 38-17 in favor of Clemson. Kenton, I believe you had 34-16, if I remember correctly. Again, it's a really tough game, a really tough environment for NC State to go down there and shock the world.
I don't believe that NC State has the facilities and the tools for the type of game it'll take to win here. I think that if we're looking at an offensive line that I would say is, capable, I would feel good about this game. I would feel good about this game. And by capable, I'm not saying the offensive line is incapable. I'm saying consistently capable. If you watch these first 3 games, you're telling me that offensive line looks good to you? Okay. So with that in mind, if our offensive line looks consistently capable against this Clemson defensive line, it could be a whole nother ball game, but I just don't see that happening.
Consistency and discipline are the 2 biggest pillars that NC State has missed out on in these first 3 games. If you can implore a way to find both of them on Saturday, perhaps anything can happen. That'll do it for us here this week and on Friday. Thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button. Drop your comments down in the comment box. Tell us what you think about Kenton's keys. Perhaps you might have a couple keys on the top of your mind. If you have any score predictions, drop those down in the comment box as well. Mash that subscribe button, and we'll see you on Saturday post-game for our post-game live feed. I've also figured out how to put this on our Twitter as well. So if you see us on Twitter, you'll also be able to see our live on our Twitter feed. Much more easily accessible now, so hopefully y'all will join us then. So until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.